The notice was taped to her door like a slap in the face. Violation unauthorized garden decor. Remove by 8 a.m. or face fines. Grandma Ruth, 78, stared at it, her hands trembling not with fear, but with a fury that burned hotter than a Texas summer. Her little bungalow, her sanctuary for 50 years, was under attack by some self-proclaimed HOA she'd never even voted for. Ruth had lived on Maple Street since her husband, Frank, had carried her over the threshold in '69. It was a quiet neighborhood in Willow Creek, where kids played kickball in the cul-de-sac and folks waved from their porches. Ruth's front yard was her pride, a riot of wildflowers, a bird bath Frank had built, and a dozen quirky garden gnomes she'd collected over decades. Each gnome had a name: Gus, Mabel, Tiny Tim, and a story. They weren't just decor, they were family. But 3 days ago, a group calling themselves the Willow Creek Homeowners Association had rolled into town, claiming authority no one had given them. They wore crisp uniforms with HOA stitched in gold, drove a shiny black SUV, and handed out notices like they owned the place. Nobody knew who they were or where they'd come from, but they acted like they answered to God himself. It started small. They'd slapped fines on Mr. Larson for his unapproved mailbox color and hassled the Garcias over a basketball hoop. Ruth had ignored their first letter about her gnomes, thinking it was a prank. But this morning's notice was different, threatening, personal. Failure to comply will result in immediate property seizure. It read, seizure. Her home. The place where she'd raised 2 kids, buried 3 dogs, and kept Frank's memory alive. Ruth crumpled the paper, her knuckles white. Over my dead body, she muttered. The trouble began when Ruth called her neighbor, Jenny, a sharp-tongued single mom who ran a popular local blog. Jenny had been digging into these HOA imposters and found nothing: no records, no registration, just a P.O. box in Nevada. They're not even a real HOA, Jenny said, her voice crackling through the phone. They're scammers. Ruth, probably trying to bully folks into paying fines or signing over property rights. I'm posting about this tonight. Ruth hung up, her mind racing. Scammers in her neighborhood. She wasn't some helpless old lady. She'd grown up on a farm, learned to shoot at 12, and kept Frank's old 1945 Colt 45 in a locked box under her bed, just in case. By noon, the fake HOA was back. Their SUV screeched to a stop in front of Ruth's house, and 5 of them piled out, clipboards in hand, looking like they'd stepped out of a bad cop show. The leader, a stocky man with a buzz cut and a smug grin, called himself Director Mitchell. He banged on Ruth's door, shouting about compliance checks. Ruth peeked through the curtains, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She slipped the Colt into her apron pocket and stepped onto the porch. "Get off my property," she said, her voice steady as steel. Mitchell laughed, a condescending chuckle. "Ma'am, we're the HOA. Your gnomes violate Code 47B. Remove them now, or we'll do it for you." He gestured to his crew, who started toward her garden with crowbars. Crowbars. Ruth's blood boiled. These weren't neighbors. They were thugs in uniforms, tearing into her life like it was nothing. That's when the twist came. From across the street, a figure emerged: Old Man Carter, the neighborhood recluse who hadn't spoken to anyone in years. He was a Vietnam vet, wiry and grizzled, with a limp and a scowl. Nobody knew much about him, except that he kept to himself and had a stare that could stop a bull. He hobbled over, leaning on a cane, and pointed a gnarled finger at Mitchell. "You're no HOA," he growled. "I checked. You're con artists, preying on good people. Get out before this gets ugly." The HOA crew froze, thrown off by Carter's sudden appearance. Ruth blinked, stunned. Carter, of all people, had her back. The situation spiraled fast. Mitchell, Red-faced, doubled down. "This is our jurisdiction," he barked, waving a fake badge. His crew started ripping up Ruth's garden, smashing a gnome named Betsy into ceramic shards. Neighbors gathered, phones out, recording the chaos. Jenny was there, live streaming to her blog's 10,000 followers. "This is what tyranny looks like," she shouted into her phone. The crowd grew, kids, parents, even the mailman murmuring. Angry. Ruth felt the weight of the Colt in her pocket, her fingers itching. She didn't want to use it, but she wasn't about to let these goons destroy her home. "Stop," Ruth shouted, stepping forward. The crew ignored her, kicking over her bird bath. That was it. She pulled the Colt from her apron, holding it low but firm. The crowd gasped. Mitchell's smug grin vanished. "You're gonna shoot us over some gnomes," he scoffed, but his voice shook. "This ain't about gnomes," Ruth said, her eyes blazing. "This is about my home, my life. You don't get to come here and take it." The air was electric, the crowd buzzing. Carter stepped beside her, his cane planted like a flag. "You heard her," he said. "Leave." Mitchell, desperate to save face, grabbed a megaphone. "This woman is a danger to the community," he blared. "We're enforcing order." But the crowd wasn't buying it. Someone threw a tomato, splattering Mitchell's uniform. Then another. The HOA crew backed toward their SUV, rattled. Ruth didn't move, her Colt steady, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and defiance. The neighbors closed in, shouting, "Get out and leave her alone." Jenny's live stream exploded 50,000 views and climbing. Then came the climax. One of the HOA goons, a lanky guy with a ponytail, panicked and swung a crowbar at Ruth's mailbox, knocking it to the ground. The crowd roared. Ruth raised the Colt, not aiming, just showing she meant business. "Next one who touches my property gets a closer look at this," she said. The goon dropped the crowbar, hands up. Mitchell, now sweating, tried to rally his crew, but they were already retreating. The wooden fence they'd smashed earlier lay in pieces, a symbol of their overreach. A neighbor kid ran up, planting a hand-painted sign in the lawn, "HOA tyranny ends here." The crowd cheered, phones flashing, capturing the moment. It was chaos, raw and real, the kind of scene that goes viral in hours. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Jenny's video hit 1 million views by midnight, sparking outrage across social media. As Grandma HOA trended nationwide, local news picked up the story, exposing the fake HOA as a scam run by a shady LLC out of Vegas. The director and his crew vanished, leaving their SUV abandoned. Cops found fake badges and forged documents inside. Ruth became a folk hero, her image white hair, Colt in hand plastered on t-shirts and memes. "Don't mess with Grandma" became a rallying cry. But Ruth didn't care about the fame. She sat on her porch the next day, sipping sweet tea, her gnomes back in place. Carter joined her, silent but present, a new friend forged in battle. The neighborhood rallied, starting a real HOA, one they voted for, with rules that made sense. Ruth's defiance had changed everything, shattering the illusion of untouchable authority. Her little stand had reminded everyone home is worth fighting for. The twist lingered, too. Carter, it turned out, wasn't just a recluse. He'd been a private investigator in the 80s, sniffing out scams like this one. His quiet life was a choice, not a retreat. He and Ruth became the neighborhood's unofficial guardians, watching for trouble, sharing stories over coffee. Willow Creek wasn't just a place anymore. It was a community, united by a 78-year-old with a Colt and a heart full of fire. What do you think? Could you stand up to a fake HOA like Ruth? Share your thoughts below.